All right. Good evening. My name is Christy. My topic is on gut health, probiotics, and weight management. So, my research questions were first, does consuming or supplementing a probiotic help people maintain or lose weight? And then, additionally, is there a difference in benefits between natural and supplemental foods? And so, I'll get into some of the sources that I looked at. In terms of my research methods and things that I read and searched for, so looked at a couple meta analyses. So was ultimately looking for statistically significant results in scientific studies regarding probiotics and weight management. So searching for that link between the two variables in meta-analyses. So looking at overall trends. And then similarly, literature reviews for general connections seen between the two variables. Um, in a lot of these studies, they were a group of people who were people or animals who were supplemented with a probiotic and seen if they maintained or lost weight or gained weight. And then looked at individual scientific studies to see the different types of probiotics that were used and looking at um, the correlation between those between that and weight management. And then finally, I looked at some recent news articles, and that's just to show how popular probiotics have become and how a lot of people are starting to supplement their diet with them, and then kind of show some of the general public thoughts on probiotics. So, overall, my findings were that in the news articles that I looked for, they talked about how popular they've become in the past 5 years or so. They're being marketed in a lot of foods, so even foods that were had naturally occurring probiotics are now being marketed saying this contains probiotics. And then supplements as well, because the supplement industry for probiotics has increased significantly. And now they're being used in beauty products as well, so topical beauty products, because there's been a link between um, probiotics and skincare. So another finding was that um, there there are problems with some of the marketed supplements. There isn't a lot of quality control on probiotic supplements, so some companies can advertise these products and they may not be the appropriate types of probiotics, or they can be overconsumed and cause gut dysbiosis or just overall gastrointestinal issues in individuals. Some research, a lot of the research that I looked at found that there are certain bacteria that play a role in weight loss, and that's just because those bacteria help break down and digest food and can create the appropriate nutrients for the body to use, making the body more efficient in metabolizing the foods that they eat. And then gut flora in animals, so that includes any tested animals, so humans and rats. Um, so the change in gut flora caused some to either gain or lose weight accordingly, but changes in gut flora did not necessarily result in weight loss or gain. So the first source I'm going to talk about was a literature review in the role of probiotics in microbiota. So it overall it stated that um, there are limited human studies focused on probiotic administration for obesity, which can be an issue just because in rats they obviously do not have the same makeup as we do, and just because there is a significant link with weight loss and probiotics in animals doesn't necessarily mean that that is true for all people. The study also found evidence of an anti-obesity effect, a statistically significant link between the two bacteria, lactobacilli and bifidobacteria. So those two types were linked with decreasing weight gain as well as weight loss. And then it found a number of studies that reported reductions in weight gain and fat tissue mass. So just like I was saying with those two bacteria, um, like I said, certain bacteria are correlated with that. And then there's also an anti-atherogenic and anti-inflammatory effect when probiotics are used appropriately. So that can be beneficial as well, and not necessarily just weight loss, but if it can have an anti-inflammatory effect, that can help gut function as well. And then it also found overall that there was a link between using probiotics and uh, people's blood lipid profile as well as glucose tolerance. So that could potentially mitigate, if there's a link between that and glucose tolerance, that could potentially mitigate like metabolic syndrome down the road or diabetes, things like that. Second study, overall, it was a natural solution for obesity is what it was called. Another literature review or meta-analysis, it found that appetite suppression, lipid metabolism regulation, and increase of energy expenditure were found when the subjects were given a probiotic supplement. They found that this plant bacteria called Amelia sinensis was the most representative species, exerting several different types of anti-obesity effects. So the implication with that is potentially, if that's the most effective probiotic, looking at the ingredient labels in the supplements and seeing if that one is in there. But it did also find that animal sources of probiotics were shown to combat obesity. So, like lactobacillus, as I was saying on the previous slide, were also effective. So the next source, probiotics for weight loss. This was another systematic review. So it found in various studies that it was actually only 4 studies that were looked at. So this was a little bit different than the previous findings. It did say that the intestinal microbiota could be a potential determinant of obesity. However, they found that there were not significant effects of probiotics on body weight and BMI. So some subjects lost a little bit of weight, but it wasn't, based on their measures, it wasn't statistically significant. And then they stated that, or they concluded that probiotics have limited efficacy in terms of decreasing body weight and BMI. And ultimately, they concluded that probiotics were not effective for weight loss. That was a little bit interesting. I was thinking it was potentially just the types of methods that they used for measuring the effects. And like I said, there were only 4 studies examined, so maybe there was a little bit of bias in the types of studies that were used. But I thought that was interesting that contradicted a lot of the other stuff that I looked at. And then for my next source, this was the effect of lactobacillus specifically on supplementation. So this was a single study. They called it LPR as an abbreviated version. And they found that mean weight loss was not statistically significant between LPR and the placebo groups in men, but for whatever reason, the weight loss in women was significantly higher. So the implications of this study is that LPR, so that lactobacillus, and I've brought that up a couple times now, that could be the key type of bacteria that could help maybe women specifically achieve a sustainable weight. And then for my last source that I'm going to talk about, it was the interplay between weight loss, microbiota, and adolescence. So instead of just looking at a study with adults, I kind of wanted to see what this would look like in younger folks. So this was one study. It looked at the influence of obesity treatment on gut microbiota in overweight adolescents. So those were people or children from ages 13 to 15. And the one in the group taking the probiotic experienced over 4 kilograms average of weight loss, and this was paired with exercise as well, and they experienced significant BMI reductions after the intervention. The comparison group showed less than 2 kilograms average of weight loss, so That's pretty significant in terms of the difference between the two groups. And they talked about B. fragilis and lactobacillus. So again, that's the fourth time that's come up. Those increased in the high weight loss group, indicating a possible link between those bacteria. So conclusions with that is that the calorie restrictions and physical activity, that can have a significant impact on gut microbiota related to weight loss, and that is if paired with a probiotic. So with all of those, overall conclusions is based on the literature. There's likely a significant link between certain bacteria strains and weight loss. So biggest one I saw was the lactobacillus strain. And then with some of those studies, there was a more significant link for women. The reasons why, not really sure, but that's definitely an implication for practice. And then finally, I didn't see a whole lot on the benefits of the supplement versus food, because in general, the studies were focused on the supplement. However, based on the bacteria that were discovered to be correlated with weight loss, if those types of bacteria are present in food, then I mean, it would make sense that eating those foods would be just as effective. So, in terms of things to consider before practice, whether or not, I mean, it's kind of difficult to discover exactly how healthy a person's gut microbiota is, but based on their symptoms, if they already have GI issues, they might have a not a great gut flora. There are things like based on examining the client and seeing what they already eat. If they have a high fat diet, a high calorie diet, if they consume artificial sweeteners, a lot of alcohol, or they don't sleep well, then that significantly influences their gut. And so that could be something that indicates they need a probiotic or the types of foods. With the fermented foods, that may be more beneficial if people are kind of interested in that and they're able to stomach it, because I know some people don't like certain types of naturally probiotic foods. And then continued being able to, so ultimately in terms of practice, being able to advise clients on how to choose one if they're interested in choosing one, how and when to use them. So again, if there are certain types that can be harmful, if they're using it too much or just using the supplement too much at all, that can be an issue as well. So just letting them know how to use them. And then, as I mentioned kind of on the previous slide, who would be well suited for it? Is their diet kind of already struggling, or do they have a pretty well balanced diet? Are they having GI issues, things like that? And then ultimately, it's just going to be a judgment call, and probably different people have different opinions on this, but that comes with continued research, and it most likely comes from experience as well with gut health and weight management. And here are my references. So the first 5 I talked about, and then the last 2 were some of the online resources that I used, but please let me know if there are any questions.